My pleasure and a real honor to introduce our speaker today, Tamika Butler. I've had the opportunity to hear Tamika speak in a variety of settings, and every time I learn something and I'm challenged to really think about my work and our field as planners in different ways. And I think that Tamika's had that impact on a lot of people around the country over the years. The diversity of roles that Tamika has had in her background really give her perspective to speak on a variety of topics related to the planning profession. Until recently, Tamika was Toole Design's Director of Planning for California and the Director of Equity and Inclusion. In addition to her roles there on planning projects, she also led their external efforts to integrate equity into all project work and internal efforts for Toole to become a more diverse, inclusive workplace that employs people of all backgrounds. Prior to that, Tamika was the executive director of the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust, a nonprofit that addresses social and racial equity and wellness by building parks and gardens in park-poor communities across greater Los Angeles. And before that, when I first learned of Tamika, she was the executive director of the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition. In her current role, is as a consultant working in a variety of areas related to all the things that I've just described, and really continuing to push and make a huge impact in cities around the country. We wish that we could have you here in person, Tamika, to welcome you to Tucson, but everyone, please join me in virtually welcoming Tamika to the University of Arizona.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the snaps and the virtual claps. I'm excited to be here. I wish I could be there in person. I've been trying to get there for a while. Fun to have some friends and colleagues in the crowd. If you see me speak recently, some of this is gonna feel repetitive to you, but as I keep saying to folks, that's because the work is not done. And so I'm just gonna keep saying stuff until it feels like there's a change. So let me go ahead and share my screen. As Gina said, I'll talk for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then hopefully have plenty of time for some robust Q&A. So, and I will also apologize. We're doing some housework, and so I'm taking this from my in-laws' backyard, so I'm not responsible for any noises you may hear. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The practice of equitable planning. So I'm a person that likes to set clear expectations about what you're going to get from me and our time together. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about me and my company and how I got to a place where I call myself a planner, and what you can do to confront power and privilege and really be an equitable planner. So who am I? As has been said, my name is Tamika, and I absolutely love to bike. It's what brought me to this transportation work. I'm a person who has many identities, but being someone who loves to bike is definitely one of them. Now, while I wouldn't necessarily call myself a cyclist, I would say that the feeling of freedom and happiness and centeredness I feel on a bike is everything to me. And it's a big reason why I do this work, because I would love for other people to experience that same joy that I experience when I'm on a bike. And so what do I do? As you heard in my bio, I've done a lot of things. And you know, that's not a surprise. I think we have to start paying attention to the resumes of folks of color, and particularly women of color, and particularly Black women, and how often they might move from place to place, and what that says about them, or what that says about what it is like to be someone who is outspoken in the work world. Because I wanted to be able to be my full authentic self, in July, I started my own consulting firm, Tamika L Butler Consulting. And it's been really great to continue my planning work, but to also work with a plethora of clients, from the museum industry to parks to transportation to really everything in between. And so am I a planner? Well, when I think about my origin story to becoming a planner, for me, I think about where I went to college. I said I have a lot of identities, and one of my main identities is being a Midwesterner. Um, I grew up kind of all over the world because my dad was in the military, but I went to high school and college in Omaha, Nebraska, where my parents are from, where they met in high school, where my dad has 14 brothers and sisters and grew up in the projects. Omaha was a big part of my life. And despite the fact that being on a Jesuit university didn't necessarily mean that there were a ton of Black gay kids running around, what I did learn is really what it is to be a person of service and a person who is for and with others. And that's a big part of how I do all of my work and how I see all that I do. At some point, I decided that I was too Black and too gay to be in the Midwest. And so I thought I have to go to law school and I have to go somewhere on the coast. And really law school wasn't a decision I consciously made. I had parents who didn't go to college who wanted me to be more successful than they had been. And they said, you can be a doctor, or you can be a lawyer. Law school was shorter. I don't like blood. And so it seemed like the reasonable decision. To this day, I think if I said to my parents, I'm a planner, I don't know that they would know what that meant. I think they would say, well, you're a lawyer who has a new job, right? Because for them, me going to Stanford was such a marker of success of the sacrifices they had made. Beyond that, when I decided to go to Stanford, it was largely because, you know, as someone who was leaving the Midwest thinking I'm too Black, I'm too gay, where better to go than the Mecca, San Francisco of all gay life? I think it was unfortunate. No one really explained to me that Palo Alto is not San Francisco. And beyond that, no one really explained to me that San Francisco is a gay mecca. If you happen to be, you know, in certain categories, and chubby Black woman is not one of them. Now, Oakland, that's a different conversation for another day. But you know, realizing that I was coming from Nebraska and I was close to San Francisco, and that there weren't as many Black people in San Francisco as there were in Omaha was really stark for me. Um, After law school, I got a fellowship where I got to start my dream job. And my dream job was to open up a one-stop workers' rights clinic in the historically Black communities of San Francisco. And the reason is because when I was in law school, my dad was laid off from his job. And I never had to watch my dad cry and tell me what it felt like to be older, to be a Black man, and how he felt like he was discriminated against and treated differently. And he didn't feel like he could tell me his daughter, who was becoming an employment lawyer at one of the nation's best law schools. And I never wanted anyone to feel like they didn't have someone to go to again. And so I opened up these clinics in the Western Addition and Bayview Hunters Point. And when I opened up the clinic in Bayview Hunters Point, it was tough. It was tough to get that predominantly Black community to talk to me, because my young 20-something Stanford graduate self didn't look like what their vision of a lawyer was. Just like now, I think often I don't look like what people's vision of a planner is. But beyond that, no one wanted to talk about their job until they knew where I stood on the T line that was coming through. And you know, San Francisco had started this new Muni line that was going to reach Bayview Hunters Point. And a lot of the people in the community were not happy about it. And they were not happy about it because they didn't feel like it had been planned with them. They felt like no one had talked to them because it wasn't actually for them. It wasn't about connecting them to the city core. It wasn't about giving them opportunities to jobs. It was about bringing white folks in to get to Candlestick Park, where the San Francisco 49ers used to play, and then taking them right back out. And that was really my first interaction with the way in which transportation is a prism through which we should see all of our social justice issues. If I couldn't answer folks on how I felt about the T, they didn't want to talk to me about their legal issue. After I left San Francisco, I decided that law wasn't for me. I had this great job at a foundation overseeing our Boys and Men of Color work, right as Obama launched My Brother's Keeper, and overseeing our education portfolio and our LGBTQ portfolio. And it was what I thought was my dream job. And then I, you know, experienced being at a white-led organization and what that meant, and having conversations about how I needed to dress more like a lady, and just a lot of conversations about my Blackness and my queerness. And so ultimately, when it was time to leave, I was like, what am I going to do next? And I ended up being the executive director of the LA County Bicycle Coalition, which was not only a surprise to me, but a surprise to many people in the community. Uh, you know, as many of us know who are in bike communities, the communities are small. So when I was hired, they found this picture on my Facebook and were kind of like, at least she bikes, right? But no one knew who I was. And this was a big deal. That first paragraph, finally, we see white smoke rising above the downtown headquarters of the LA County Bike Coalition. That is a reference to the Pope. Like, this was a big hire for them, and no one could figure out who I was or what I was going to do. And it was a surprise to me, because when I first had friends suggest that I apply for this job, I went to the website and I looked around and I said, no. I'm worried that this feels like a pretty white organization, and bike lanes are the first sign of gentrification. And I can't ruin my street cred. Like, I'm a civil rights lawyer. I can't do this job. But I had a friend who is a woman of color in San Francisco, Linda Liu, who really pushed me. And she was from a public health background. And she talked about the way in which she loved the San Francisco Bike Coalition, of which she was a member, but she just wished that at the time, and I think they are doing a lot of this now, and one of the leaders in doing this now, but at the time, she felt like she wished they could be more intersectional. Why were they, so happy to take money from Google, but not really pushing Google about how the Google buses and how folks, how some of these tech startups were impacting housing affordability, the public health impacts of folks getting pushed further out of the city core, all of the things that come with looking at built environment. And as I said, I went to a Catholic university, and so when I was guilted, it worked quite successfully. And when I took the job, I said to the board, I'm Black and I'm queer, and that's how I see all of my work. And if you don't want this to be a social justice organization, don't hire me. And they did, and it was pretty awesome. I was happy all the time. It was, the best job I ever had, still to this day. When you get to have a job when you're on your bike every single day, how could you not have the smile on your face when you get to wear shirts this wrinkled and no one cares? It's pretty amazing. Beyond that, while I was at the Bike Coalition, we helped pass Vision Zero, make LA a Vision Zero city. And before it was cool, and before other cities were talking about it, and in fact, when major national organizations were putting us down about it and telling us we didn't understand Vision Zero, we were saying that enforcement had to be taken out of Vision Zero. Sure, we had the Bike Coalition, and sure, we had LA Walks, but we had a police accountability organization in our coalition. We had an affordable housing land trust in our coalition. We had the Department of Public Health in our coalition. We had folks who understood that Vision Zero and traffic and transportation issues were not just about biking and walking. I also got to be at press conferences all the time, with our mayor, who some people say might be the next Secretary of Transportation. We launched Bike Share while I was at the LA County Bicycle Coalition, and we worked really hard to pass a county ballot measure that won't sunset, and was the first time that the county allocated resources specifically to active transportation, biking, and walking. You could say that it was, not only a fun job, but a glamorous job. I mean, I was in LA, I was in Hollywood, and I got to also ride my bike to the Emmys. The guy all the way on the left, Tom, was a producer for Mad Men. He got us into the award show. We got to ride our bikes to the red carpet. And it was a Hollywood story, but every Hollywood story has its downfall and has its gossip. And so at some point during my tenure there was somebody running for city council, and not just any council seat, my council seat, and in the area where I lived. And we had one particular street in our council district that was supposed to get a bike lane, but our council member shut it down when he came into office, and people continued to die on that street. One day, in fact, I was sitting outside eating dinner with friends, and I saw a woman, an older adult, who was hit and who died. And that was the last straw for many people. and it propelled this candidate into the race. It was somebody who owned a bike shop. The bike community loved him. Everyone thought he was amazing, except those of us who were folks of color, and many women in the space, but particularly women of color, because our interaction with him had not been great. He was kind of an asshole. And so it was no surprise to us when it was discovered that he was on the dark parts of the interweb using the N-word. I'm saying, fat people deserve to be raped because of their bad decision, that transgender people just needed to make their mind up, doing all kinds of unconscionable things. And at the end of the day, many folks in the bike community said, all of those things may happen, but he's going to get us a bike lane. So we still have to vote for him. So I think as we look around sometimes in our professional lives, in our personal lives, or even in our political landscape, as we look around and wonder how people could be silent when someone is so clearly doing the wrong thing, we have to remember that we've probably all been part of situations where we knew something was wrong, but it was hard to give up on how we might achieve some goal by just ignoring it. And so a number of people, from funders to staff to board members, asked me to publicly endorse this candidate, despite the fact that as a nonprofit, we didn't endorse candidates. And ultimately, when I refused to do it, it was time to leave. And, for me, that really was that crystallizing piece about bikes might not discriminate against people, but people discriminate against people, right? And when I tried to talk about that in the context of this council race, no one wanted to hear it, right? Sometimes folks just want us to focus on the planning project, focus on biking, focus on whatever it is, but don't talk about race. And when those of us who have no choice but to talk about it because of who we are, when we try to say the only option is that we constantly talk about race and racism and all that we do, because that is the only way to make planning, to make land use, to make anything we do relevant, is if we talk about race. That is the only option. Well, the reality is a lot of folks are just very uninterested in that option, right? And it's hard because what I love most about biking and planning is when I'm in space with people, right? Whether it's virtually or whether it's at a conference, like, I think a lot of us have this experience of like, yo, these are my people. Like, these are great folks. Like, a lot of us get into this work because we want to help people. We want people to feel connected to space and place. We want to make something beautiful, and we want folks to feel welcome there. That's why we do the work. That's why I do the work, right? When I do this work, I think about my wife and my son and the world I want to create for them. And it's work that all of us have to do, right? Whenever I think about my wife, Kelly, I think about her name, and I think about her sister's name. Kelly and Robin have these names that were unisex in the 80s when they were named and growing up in Phoenix. And their parents intentionally named them that because they didn't want them to ever be discriminated against, right? And my parents named me Tamika, and they named my older sister Tanisha. They're like, y'all are Black. Everybody's going to know you're Black. And if they're going to discriminate against you, we'd rather them just do it. Right. And so in our marriage, we had to realize we were coming from very different places. Besides all the obvious things you can see, we're also just culturally very different. And so we had to figure out how we were going to come together and compromise, and how we were going to raise our son. Some things were going to be non-negotiable. Like, he was going to like biking. Obviously, his first Christmas, he's getting a bike helmet. But other things we had to figure out together. One of them was, are we going to raise him free of gender? Are we going to let him tell us ultimately what his gender is? And what we decided was no, because he's a black boy, and he's going to grow into a Black man, and that's dangerous in this society. And so we decided we had to raise him, and the only responsible thing to do was to always teach him what it meant to be a Black boy, not to hinder him from having joy, but to make him aware of the fact that he was going to have that talk one day. And once we decided that, Kelly, with her, gender blind name, didn't get to say, well, great, you're the Black mom, so you got this, right? I'm out. But too often when we talk about equity in our work, that's what we do to our colleagues of color. That's what we do to our Indigenous colleagues. That's what we do to our colleagues with disabilities, our colleagues who are queer, any of our colleagues who are in oppressed groups. We leave it to them to do that work. And all of a sudden, when that happens, this field that I love so much, that I said, you know, we're all on the same page. We're all here to do work for the same reason, to help people, to make a connection between place and space. All of a sudden, that feeling of us all being in agreement starts to feel like those of us who are on the same team about the intents of our work, we're not so clear that we're on the same team anymore, that we're on the same page and that we have the same ideals. And that seems more important now than ever, because our country is facing two pandemics that are ravaging us: COVID-19 and systemic racism. And it seems more than ever that we're experiencing two different worlds. Some worlds where folks are just concerned about having their boozy brunch, while others of us are literally trying to claim space and just ask folks to see our dignity. And the reality is that sometimes, especially, you know, in our spaces, we like to silo ourselves. Well, I'm just a transportation person. Well, I'm just an architect. Well, I'm just a housing person. But for our community members, when we show up to these meetings, they don't lead single issue lives. So it doesn't really matter to them what school we went to or what area we're there to talk about. We have to understand that for many people, all of these issues are connected, and they've been connected for a long time. You know, Black and Brown folks have been being hunted. Beyond that, our country was founded on the idea that hard work and perseverance could get you to be successful. But the hard work that we're supposed to emulate is the hard work of folks who theoretically discovered our country while taking and stripping the land from folks. As I sit here on stolen Tongva land, employing free and exploiting that free enslaved labor. And that's the hard work that we're supposed to believe. Those of us who do this work and live at the intersections, we know, particularly in transportation, that we have to talk about race all the time, because race has always been a part of the transportation conversation. Race and how we keep people apart and try to keep people in their place has always been a part of this work. Beyond that, again, there's no single issue struggle. So it's been part of our criminal justice system. It's part of the way we zone and plan communities and allow for environmental racism to kill low-income folks of color. It's critical in the way we continue to segregate our schools and to segregate our communities, to gerrymander, to make sure that, again, there are certain people on the other side of the tracks. And many of us know about this book. It's a New York Times bestseller. As everyone's getting woke, they're starting to read it. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, you should read it. You should read it. I like the author. I've been on panels with the author, but it doesn't change that the thing about redlining that is so important for us to understand, particularly those of us who do planning work. This book says it's a forgotten history of how our government segregated America. And I would ask, forgotten for who? Because it still impacts many of us and our families and our ability to build wealth. This isn't new, but it is literally killing us, right? Our communities are killing us. This is killing us. It is hard to find folks of color, Black and Brown and Indigenous folks, who don't know people who were killed by COVID-19, right? I lost a friend from college. It's hard to find those of us who don't have folks in our family who never stop going to work, who don't have the privilege to sit at home and just zoom in. My mom, my sister, right? We know that in the current world we're in, we can build all the pretty infrastructure we want, and we can have a bright green bike lane. But in this video of George Floyd gasping for his last breath, calling out for his mother that I've never seen and never will, I can still spot that green bike lane in the back and know that infrastructure won't save my life if the color of my skin is always viewed as dangerous. And so for me as a planner who loves bikes, who loves bike lanes, I don't know how we talk about bike lanes without talking about these issues. I don't know how we encourage people to get out into the slow streets and walk or run when those of us who are Black know that doing so could result in our last breath. I don't know how we continue to ignore a world in which many of my like white bike bro friends who I love and adore, they'll get pulled over by a cop for some bike infraction and they'll chew the dude out. They'll get in his face, they'll yell at him and be like, you don't know the law, because they know the law better than the bike cop, right? But a Black man's riding his bike in LA and he gets stopped for an infraction and he loses his life. And so for some of you, you're showing up every day for your Zoom calls, for your classes, for your hanging out with friends, and you're just pushing through. But for some of us, we can't do that. We want to push through. We want to be successful. We want to be the best student. We want to be the best planner. We want to be the best at what we do. We want folks to recognize us for our work, for our brilliance. But we know that for too many of us, no one will even know our name unless it turns into a hashtag. And that's a lot. It's a lot to just keep showing up. And I always give a seizure warning for this slide because this is how it feels. Like being a person in an oppressed group and continuing to do this work when folks like to say equity, like to say they care, but just keep going. When you are screaming out that you're not okay, but it seems like no one cares. Because for many folks who have historically been in power in this planning profession, white men, they don't want to hear it. It's just too much. They want to just sit at the computer, do the work they're supposed to do, and all this talk of race and equity just makes them want to pull their hair out. And more than anything, they want those of us who are hurting to know that they're not racist. They didn't do anything. So why do they have to deal with it? They just want all of this conversation to stop and they want things to get back to normal because it's a lot. But the reality is, it's always been this way for some of us. And for other people, they haven't had to acknowledge that because of their privilege, because something didn't personally impact them. It didn't matter. But now that they're starting to see things impact them, maybe it matters a little more. But what about us who have been saying this all along? What about what we need? And we need folks to stop killing Black people more than anything else. That's how you become an equitable planner. You figure out how we're going to stop killing Black people. More practically, what can you do? First, you have to understand the difference between diversity, equity, and inclusion. People use those words interchangeably. There's a scholar at the University of Minnesota who says, you know, people use equity like it's the color blue. Some people mean navy, some people mean sky blue, some people mean electric blue. We're not all talking about the same things. And we have to get to a point where that's no longer true, where diversity, equity, and inclusion are not interchangeable words. Diversity is just this 90s clip art, right? Get as many diverse people as you can in a picture. Someone old, great, make them happy. Someone who looks like a religious minority, make them super smiley. What? Is that a person in a wheelchair? Put them in the front. Women, sprinkle them in. Lots of women. Is that a white guy? Put him in the back. Make him pretend like he can't see, right? People who just want diversity just want diverse faces. That is not the same as inclusion. People like to say that inclusion is making sure everyone feels welcome somewhere. That's inclusion like 101, and we have to get past that. True inclusion means that there is a redistribution of power. It means that those diverse faces that are at the table are also allowed to have opinions. They are allowed to shape culture. They are allowed to make decisions. They are allowed to decide where money goes and where money doesn't go. True inclusion requires power, and you can have a place that is very diverse without it being inclusive. Think about organizations, think about academic departments, think about institutions that have a ton of diversity when you look at those entry levels. But the further you get to the top, the closer you get to tenure, the closer you get to folks on the board, all of a sudden that diversity disappears. And so they're not inclusive because power is not shared. And if we really care about equity as much as planners say we do, then we have to understand that inclusion is part of the process for us to get to equity. Instead, people like to think of equity like this, right? It's a great picture. It helps like everybody realize that equality is giving everybody the same thing, where equity is giving them what they need. But this is a picture we have to stop using. One, it doesn't really show the reality, and it doesn't show us where we should be trying to get. We should be trying to get to liberation. I do this work as a Black woman because my people have been trying to get free since we were enslaved and brought here. You know, I saw Mark Ruffalo's tweet last night. Unless you're indigenous, we're all immigrants. White people have to figure out how to stop either erasing indigenous people or erasing Black folks, right? Everyone is not an immigrant. I've been trying to get free. And the reason I do mobility work is because I want people to be free. I want people to travel to the places and spaces and resources and people that they love and want and need, full of dignity. I want them to feel that liberation. That should be our goal. And beyond that, the other reason I hate these pictures is because who decided that baseball was what we wanted to watch? Right now, the Dodgers are in the World Series. So maybe here in LA, that's not the case. But the reality is, I'm not just trying to see over a fence, because even when you take down that wooden fence, the hidden fence that too few people talk about when we talk about equity is power. Who had the power to decide that what we wanted was to watch a baseball game? Who had the power to decide that what I was asking for were some boxes? Right? What if I want to play in the game? What if I want to coach the team? What if I want to own the team? What if I want to have the exclusive distribution rights for peanuts for all of the MLB teams in the league? And again, what if I hate baseball? Right? We have to talk about power, and we have to talk about the fact that folks should be able to self determine what they want, and that the folks who we say we're here to serve, they have power too. We have to understand that it is colonial to say we want to empower people, and we have to get that word out of our vernacular. Sure, I, Tamika, can determine if I feel empowered, but someone else cannot come to me and say, I have all the power, I am bestowing it upon you. Now you are empowered. Now you are uplifted, right? We have to learn how to co-power folks and recognize that power isn't only something that we have over folks, but it's something we can have with folks. And then we have to start asking ourselves, how do we make individual change? How do we recognize that while there is systemic racism and white supremacy built into our institutions, built into our policies, that people make up those institutions, people make up those policies? And these are 5 questions I say that folks should ask themselves every day. Do they understand that not being racist isn't the same as being anti-racist? Why are they so afraid to be brave and confront power and privilege? And how do they decenter whiteness? How do they decenter this idea that what is normal is whatever is normal for a straight, white, cisgendered, able-bodied male, right? A young Christian person, right? How do we get folks to realize that just because something hasn't been experienced by them, it doesn't mean it isn't real? Because let me tell you, folks of color have been talking about everything that's happening in our country before it started happening. One president didn't make us a racist country. It's just now that it's impacting other people, now that women writ large might be concerned about their rights at Planned Parenthood, now it matters, despite the fact that Black women have been losing their babies for years, despite the fact that wealth didn't help Serena Williams say, as a Black woman, I almost fell prey to Black infant mortality, right? Because we have to decenter whiteness. And we have to decenter whiteness by thinking about racism and white supremacy every single day. And every single day, we have to figure out what we're doing to stop the killing of Black people so that we can realize this is not just a moment, it's a movement. I'll end by saying that this is a journey, right? And in the journey, you might start off as an actor. Mel Gibson, great example, right? He's a great actor. Look at those awards. Look at his dashing smile. And sometimes when people are telling you how to do equity work, they're telling you to do something and you don't know why, but you just do it. Use they, them pronouns. Okay, I don't get it, but I'm going to do it, right? We have to understand that if we don't start internalizing those things we're doing just because we're, you know, signaling that we're woke, if we don't internalize why these things matter and how they're rooted and things that have been problems in our society, then at some point we will slip up because it will be clear that it doesn't really matter to us. And then you'll be just like Mel Gibson, a horrible human being who might be a great actor, right? Who says he hopes his girlfriend gets raped by a gang of N-words, who uses anti-Semitic remarks. You can't stop at the actor phase or some point you will slip up. You have to move to being an ally. And you have to realize that being an ally is about taking action. It's not just a noun. And then at some point, you have to realize that based on the urgency we're feeling in this country, being an ally isn't enough. We need accomplices. We need folks who are willing to risk something. We need folks who are willing to lose something, and we need folks who are willing to give up some of their power. When you're the queer person or the person with a disability or the Black person who constantly every day is bringing up in meetings like, yo, I don't know if we should be doing this. I don't think this is equitable. I don't think this is just, right? Then you know that people are like, oh, here comes Tamika again. You know how that impacts your livelihood, your ability to advance. And so if there's a woman in a meeting and she says something and it falls flat, and then 2 seconds later, a man says the same thing and everybody's like, Bob, that's a great idea. If you're an ally, you might go to her after the meeting and pull her aside and say, hey, I know you said that first. You might send her an email. You might take her out to lunch. And away from everybody else, tell her how wrong that was. But an accomplice says something in the moment in front of everybody. But we don't do that because we want to be liked. We don't want to be grouped with her, that woman who's always nagging. Ask yourself how you are going to force yourself to be an accomplice so that you're not the parent saying, well, Tamika, you're the Black parent. You got this, right? And then once we make those individual changes, we can start talking about institutional change. We can start talking about the fact that there are some people who have to be brave every single day. Being Black in this country and going out in public space is being brave. Being undocumented and continuing to go to work every day, even though you are not valued in this society, as fires rage, knowing ICE is doing sweeps, but you know you got to provide for your family, that's brave, right? We have to realize that there are those of us who have privilege so that we don't have to be brave. And so we ask for safe spaces. We ask for comfortable spaces to have this conversation. That's not good enough. We need spaces that actually are brave, where people are not afraid to make mistakes. Because if you're doing this equity work right, you're gonna make mistakes. You have to hold yourself accountable. You have to acknowledge the limits of your expertise. You have to listen to understand, not to explain, which is what so many of us do, particularly with our partners, right? You have to listen to really understand, and you have to acknowledge that there have been past harms and hold space for that harm. And only then can you start to understand the role that power plays. There are a lot of questions you can ask to figure out power dynamics, but you can always start by saying, who is in the decision-making position? And then follow up that question with, who is going to be most impacted when this decision is made? If those two groups don't align, your power dynamics are off. And then you have to analyze and challenge the privileges that allowed certain people to be in those powerful positions. We have to analyze and challenge the privilege that allows certain people to have their data valued is appropriate and other people's data valued is lacking expertise or rigor. That's what we have to do to create change. That's what we have to do to be equitable planners. And this isn't work for just some of us. This is work for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamika. Those are really powerful words, and a way for all of us to reframe the conversation that we have about equity planning and what it means. And I really appreciate your honesty and your forthrightness in talking to the group. I want to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions, just include it in the chat, and I'll see who's interested in asking some questions and give you that opportunity. Anyone? I see a lot of people that I haven't seen in a while. There's Shannon, haven't seen you in a while.
So Gina, while we're waiting for a question to come in, I do have one, and Tamika, this is something that came up in my planning theory class with some people that are in the audience. So new students to our urban planning master's program, and really asking about how sort of within the structures of bureaucracy to push and to do this where you might not be, in your own position, the decision maker in a lot of ways?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of situations where we really feel like we lack power, right? Just like the structures of whether it's a planning firm or a government institution, there are those situations where, especially those of us who are younger, more entry level or mid level, we don't have that final decision making power. But something I always challenge people is there are certainly times where folks have power over us. But there are always times when we have power over others. And so there is something we can control. When I was at the Bike Coalition and we integrated equity, it wasn't like, how can our planning and policy staff do equity work? How can our education staff do equity work, right? Our office manager was like, I don't have any power in this organization. Oh, wait, I do. I order the lunches. I order the supplies. I make these decisions every day that may seem small to some folks, but that's my influence, that's my sphere of power, and that's something I can control. And so we're only getting lunch from businesses owned by women of color only. And I may have to go and get this extra cost approved, or I may have to cut some expenses elsewhere to make this happen. And so the first thing I always tell folks is you have to reframe that and imagine going out to a community member who feels like they've never been engaged, who they've been planned against, and saying, I don't have any power. That's not really going to fly with them, right? So we have to figure out those spaces where we do have power. And then I do think too often, I think especially in progressive spaces, we like to try to say that people aren't woke enough or people aren't doing enough. And the reality is we need folks in government. We need folks out in the street burning it all down. We need folks in the boardroom. And so I can appreciate sometimes that you have to look at the wide range of things and you have to figure out what are your moments, when do you speak up. But if you find that you're never finding those moments to speak up, then you're probably doing it wrong. Or if it is truly an organization where that just is not possible, then sometimes I tell people you have to question whether or not that's the right organization for you, because there are some places where you can do that.
Great, thank you.
We do have a couple of questions. I'm going to start with the first question from Umi Pamet. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Do you want to ask your question?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, my name is Omi Pamet. Thank you so much for the talk. This was amazing. I have a question of, how do you find spots where people could step in and be an accomplice? I know you just mentioned that people can be out on the street, but also government working on both sides to make change. But how do you go about finding even a specific spot or a broad range of spots that you need people in?
I mean, I think we need accomplices in every spot. And so for me, it feels, and I want to acknowledge that as a person who is a queer, gender queer woman of color, I see these opportunities all the time. But if you're having a happy hour, a mixer, and you decide to have high tables and no one says anything until the one person in a wheelchair comes in and they can't engage with anybody because everybody's standing at a high table and they're sitting in a wheelchair, and that's the moment where it clicks for everybody. Oh man, this isn't an accessible event, right? I think there are moments like that. Being an accomplice is often just speaking up and giving voice to the thing that no one else wants to say. And sometimes we're afraid to say that because we're like, well, I don't want to be annoying. I don't want to speak out of turn. But being an accomplice just means that when there isn't that person in the room, or if that person is in the room, but they're sick of being that person, how do you speak up? How do you say something? And so I think every day there are ways to be an accomplice, right? If you're on transit and somebody's using racial slurs, right? It's saying something. Now, being an accomplice is also something that, and especially I say this to folks of color and folks in other oppressed groups, don't do it if it doesn't feel safe, right? The whole thing about that journey is there's not some mountaintop that you reach. There's some days where all you can do is be an actor. That's just all you got, right? For your own protection, for your own mental health. And so that journey is something that you go back and forth on. You're just trying to move forward every day. I hope that's helpful.
Did that answer your question? Right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have another question from Shannon Shula. You want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi Gina, and hi everyone. It's interesting seeing everyone with their fans in sunny Arizona, and I'm freezing up here in the Pacific Northwest. Got the hoodie on and everything. Yeah, so my question is, you know, I'm the token Indigenous, brown, queer person in my planning department and my organization, right? It's like Olympia, Washington, predominantly white, and it's been, you know, we talk about the same thing, you know, it's like inclusion, diversity, you know, how do we do this? But as, you know, they come to you as like the token person, like, how do we do this, right? Or like, I get sent to certain meetings because I fit all of those categories. But no one wants to have the discussion in our department. No one really wants to do it. Like, we now have like a you know, a cultural diversity committee, but like, no one wants to ask me to be part of it. So it's just, like, my question is really like, how do we start, as being that one of the only people, right? How do we start the conversation in this profession of like predominantly older white men, especially in the Pacific Northwest? It's freaking uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, I think the same thing I said before, like, first you have to think about your personal safety, and I think one of the things is you have to get your crew, right? Like, I have a crew of folks, not all in LA with me, who are folks of color in this space who I trust. And literally, like, some of you may have seen me on my phone during the intros. It was the crew. Someone was like, yo, someone just sent me this email. Let me tell you how I want to pop off, but I'm not going to pop off. And then we all were like, no, don't say that, but maybe say this, but right? And like, the thread ended with folks being like, yo, can we get on a call this weekend, right? So sometimes I think you have to sustain yourself outside. You have to realize that in our bigger field, it is changing and there are more people who get it. And I think when you find mentors, when you find people who are like, here's my email, reach out, like, do it, and create that squad that you can turn to, right? Like, that's what AOC and Alon are doing, right? Like, they have their folks who they can go to when stuff is hard. I think the other thing I always tell folks in oppressed groups, this is not my quote, but the quote I always use is, we don't have to set ourselves on fire to keep other people warm, right? Like, sometimes you just decide, this ain't it, and this is a job I'm at because I'm going to get this experience, I'm going to get this thing, and I understand that they're going to take everything they can from me, but I'm going to take everything I want, and then I'm out. Right. And so you also have to be able to set those boundaries and to keep yourself safe and sane in that situation, and then taking notes, right? So that when it is time for that review, you're like, yo, I'm a planner level 1, but here are all the meetings you sent me to in the last year that really are planner level 2 meetings. And I deserve a raise, right? And I think you just have to be able to advocate yourself when it feels safe, and then find those folks who you can talk to and who you can go to and who you can build your community with.
Thanks, it's good to see you.
Good question. Thanks. We have a question from Christian Monahan.
Howdy, and I just want to say thank you for this, because I totally resonate with getting into planning for the passion and for like making people love cities as much as I love cities, or if they don't love cities, at least have equitable transit, because rural transit is a thing. So my question is, and this is something I've noticed in my education and in my experience as a professional, is there's a very strong push to be unbiased and be neutral, particularly in public engagement and public participation, because of planning's extremely racist history. Let's be real here. But I find the more that I go through this, the more that I listen to conversations like these, that neutrality is not what we need. You know, we need to push back against hurtful language, whether it's said by a developer or by a member of the public. And as staff, that's kind of an awkward position. So how, I mean, the what you mentioned previously to the previous question about having a crew, that makes sense in a email, like, not immediate sense. So doing that on the fly is, I don't know, that's kind of where I'm wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason for the crew is because it's the acknowledgement that often sometimes in the moment you are constrained, or you can't think quick enough, or you're like, that's offensive, but I don't know how to articulate it, right? And so one, it's being kind with yourself and gracious with yourself, that sometimes you're going to make that you're going to have that experience, and having the people who can support you and help you think through it and think through what you can do in the future. I think the other thing is, as a profession, we have to realize that this work isn't neutral. Land use, zoning, those things have never been neutral. It's not neutral to put a bar in the middle of a park bench so that people don't lay there. That is making a clear statement about what you want people to do and not do, right? And so I think we have to get out of this falsehood that the work we do is neutral. And I think the more we can do that, the better. Now, again, when you're on the lower level and you have an older workforce, and not older in age, but just older in practices and mindsets and thinking, that don't want to acknowledge that the work isn't neutral, then that's where I think you have to start shifting and saying, okay, well, what are the skills I'm getting out of this job? Is this the best place for me long term? What do I want to get from it? And continue to try to make those changes. I think that's also how you start to balance. So I'm looking at Amanda's questions and Lincoln's questions because I know we're out of time. That's how you start to balance getting the work done versus getting it right, and really working with folks who are at the intersection. I think the first step is acknowledging that this work isn't neutral, and then acknowledging that while the work isn't neutral, we're in a world where we have deadlines, where we have to spend down money and we have to do this. And I think when you're in that situation, something I often try to explain to decision makers, and it might not be comfortable to do in a position of power, and when you feel like you're not in a position of power. And that's why I think one of the best ways to engage people who are overlooked is to build relationships with them outside of a project, right? When I was at a nonprofit and I was fundraising, one of the rules of fundraising is don't just go to people when you want money. So sometimes just send a note to your biggest donor and say, hey, I just want to say thanks. Hey, I saw this article in the paper that you were in. Great job, right? And it's the same thing with communities. When I was doing transportation work, I showed up at a bunch of coalition meetings that had nothing to do with bikes. But that way, when the bike lane came up, people already trusted me and knew me. Salita Reynolds, who's the Department of Transportation GM here in LA, she used to have regular meetings with all of us who ran nonprofit groups, right? So even though you might be within one sector or structure, how do you build those relationships and trust so that when you need to leverage them, you can? There used to be a bike person for the city of LA who said, you know, the advocates beat me up, but we got more done when they were active. And so you have to be able to play that inside outside game. And then you have to be able to explain to decision makers that though something feels like it takes more time, whenever you retrofit something, it costs more money and it takes more time, whether or not you're talking about a house or whether or not you're talking about equity, right?
Thanks. I think we take a couple more minutes. We have a couple of questions, if you don't mind sticking around for.
Latino community in LA, they completely changed this intersection where folks were dying. And then it didn't, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, you cut out.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
In LA, they completely changed this intersection where folks were dying, you know, new stoplights, new crosswalks, new turn radius, and then people kept dying. And then they finally went back and asked the community, and people were like, oh, well, there's a tree on that side of the street, and the bus stop with no shade shelters on the other side of the street. And so we're not going to go all the way to the intersection. We're going to wait in the shade. And when we see the bus coming, we're going to run across the street. And sometimes people don't make it, right? It was more expensive to do what they did. And had they just talked to community, they probably could have made it better without spending as much money. And so I think we have to explain to people that sometimes, even though you think it takes longer or you think it costs more, that's a fallacy. And we have to just change the mindset that this is just how you do things right.
Thank you. I have two more questions, if we don't mind sticking around for another 3 minutes. We could probably get through those. And I think that Arlie is going to be leading a discussion after Tamika's lecture ends. Yeah, so we can stick around for that as well. But let me just ask these last quick questions. Amanda Smith has a couple questions. Amanda?
Hi, thank you so much. I think you answered one of mine, which is just the struggle of taking the time that it takes to do this outside of your regular work duties. And Arlie just dropped your Instagram in the chat. I wanted to be able to follow you if you were on social media. So I'm good. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Jordan Jackson. he still here? Jordan? Might have left. I think that's, oh, Lincoln Edwards. Is Lincoln still here?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I had to take this
There we
off.
are.
So first things first, Tamika, thank you so much for this presentation. It really, really hit close to home, and it was super needed, especially this week. But my question, it comes from at the beginning of your presentation, you said we leave it to them to do that work, you know, signifying like Black people solve racism, or, you know, women solve sexism, i.e., those sort of things. And it got me thinking about when individuals are a part of, you know, these different forms of, I don't know, social division. You have, what if you have a Black person or a Black woman that has to deal with the ramifications of racism and sexism, or XYZ? So it made me want to ask, how do you, or what would you recommend as a professional planner to advocate for these individuals that have these intersections that are often overlooked?
So you cut out a little bit on my end, so I'll try to see what I could surmise, and sorry about that. But how do we effectively advocate for people who are part of the intersections and often overlooked? So one, I don't think we can just leave it to those people, but I don't think that means that those people shouldn't be at the forefront of making the decisions, right? Black folks should get to self-determine what Black folks want, just like the folks who hang out on their stoop are on the corner every day, who you might think are loitering, they probably could have filled you in about that bus stop. And so they should get to self-determine whether or not they want the intersection redesigned or if they want a shade shelter, right? So I think first of all, you work with those folks by cultivating relationships and trust with them and putting them in positions where they can effectuate change. So what I mean when I say we can't just leave the work to those people, well, white folks have to do some of this work too. They have to, you know, if you're not part of an oppressed group, if you're not queer, if you don't use they, them pronouns, you have to do some of the work to understand why. With that being said, if you have power, you have to figure out how to leverage your power to make sure other folks have a voice. Maybe if you're in government, that means you change your contracting structure so that nonprofits could be paid as the experts they are, and they can pay community members. You figure out how to pay undocumented people. But I think what our profession comes down to at its core is it's about relationships. It's about trust building, and you have to be able to talk to people. We can't just make decisions in a vacuum by looking at data and spreadsheets, right? Like some people see data, you have to learn how to see faces. And we often have to realize that even though you might have the data, who is interpreting that data? There's still bias there. And so the best way, the very best way to effectively advocate for people who are a part of these intersections is to change that for to with and work with them, not just for them.
Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up our Q&A session now, since we only got you to commit to an hour with us, but I really appreciate you taking the time to come to Tucson, although it's virtual. We hope to have you back here in person when this whole pandemic thing is behind us. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Such a meaningful topic and such a heartfelt presentation. I really appreciate it deeply. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And if you guys want to stay on and have a conversation with Arlie, he's going to